Hi there.
How's it going?
Hi, you're being recorded. Everybody just FYI. We can
Sounds good.
Jordan is so good at taking out the beginning of them that I'm like, yes, we can go ahead and record. That's fine.
Sounds great.
And she can hear
Yeah,
that.
go ahead and do it.
Mhm.
Well, I'm looking forward to the session tonight. So this is great.
Yeah, I am as well.
Thanks for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Mike, I'm in Tucson, so I'm again struggling with connection here at the hotel. But I'll start the introduction, and if you could jump in, it sounds like you have a really strong connection. If you could say a few words,
Oh yeah.
and then we'll turn it, and then we'll turn it over to Elena. Does that work?
Okay. That sounds good. So you're gonna do the introduction and then I'll say a few words. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah.
And I'm gonna scoot out after we get rolling,
I'll
ready to not be on the computer after all day.
Okay.
So with,
Sounds good.
so with both of you guys at the helm, I'm figuring I'm safe to jut out for a little while. So
Sounds good. Very good.
All right, it's 6 o'clock. We have some people in the waiting room and we are being recorded.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and get started on time.
Okay.
And Elena, I will continue to monitor the waiting room and I'll monitor the chat as we go and make sure that folks.
Okay, sound good. I'm ready.
All right. Hi there. Hi, Cheryl.
Hello. How are you?
So nice to see you. Hi, Barbara. I'm doing you in somewhere. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lindsay Pollock, and I am the provost of Sarasota University, hosting our monthly colloquium. And it's my great pleasure to have Elena Rosemond here tonight presenting about gender expansive and some strategies. I know Elena both as a Sarasota alum, and now in her role as a Sarasota faculty member. I'm excited to also let everyone here tonight know that we've launched our Sarasota Bachelor's program, and we continue to offer our Montessori Leadership and Montessori Education programs at the master's level as well. And we have tonight with us our president, Sarasota University president, Dr. Michael Levins. I'll turn it over to you, Mike, in case you have any words that you'd like to share.
That's great. Thank you, Lindsay, and thanks everyone for being here. It's an absolute pleasure to see. We've got a tremendous topic to cover tonight. So glad Elena's with us to present. And again, Sarasota University is so proud to host just tremendous speakers, tremendous topics, and provide our contribution, our nexus, if you will, to the world that we all love to be involved in. And again, looking forward to hearing the presentation. And one of the things I really like about the colloquia is the engagement everyone has. There is no prodding to get questions, and because one, the speakers are great, and two, you all have great questions to ask, and I enjoy learning from all of you. So welcome, thank you, and it's an absolute privilege for me to be here with you learning. Thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate Sarasota inviting me to do this. This is very exciting. So I am going to share my screen. And Oh boy, I gotta, I'm gonna come off as such a Luddite right out of the gate. Oh no. All right. Well, no, it won't let me. Dang. That's embarrassing
That's
and
okay.
disappointing.
Do you need to be a host,
Take
Elaine?
your time, Elaine.
Maybe I might
Yeah.
need to be the host.
Yeah, hold on just a minute. Let's see if we can make that happen. Okay. And people. Thanks. I am getting you right now.
Okay, Elena, you are the
All
co-host.
right. Let's see if there we go. Thanks for that, friends. So I'm going to there we go. All right, look at that. Redeem myself. So my name is Elena Rosemond. My pronouns are she and her. Here are some things about me. I am a cisgender queer woman. I have my Montessori early childhood credential. I, as Lindsay noted, am a graduate of the Sarasota University Masters of Arts in Montessori Leadership program. I'm a teaching head of school. I'm both a co-director and a co-director and a primary class teacher at a small-ish private school in Wilmington, North Carolina, so Eastern North Carolina. I have 2 kids of my own. I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. My 3-year-old is currently in my class, which is so far the greatest challenge of this school year because he's a real bulldozer. My top 5 strengths that I learned through my time at Sarasota are developer, empathy, achiever, adaptability, communication. And then if these things mean anything to you, I'm an Enneagram 2 wing 3 and a Cancer sun and moon and Virgo rising. So to give you just a little bit of a background of myself and how I got here today. I have been teaching Montessori for about 12 years. And prior to that, I was in museum education. And I've been in administration at our school as it grew from about 12-ish preschool students to where it is now, which is 140 students from 9 months through 8th grade. And because I've sort of been at the helm as the school has grown, I have had to learn so many things on my feet. Especially as the social landscape has changed surrounding what it's like to be queer and have queer students in the classroom. We've just sort of had to adapt and learn as we go. So I'd love to share today some of what I've learned and some of what we put into practice. I would like to acknowledge that I am in the lucky position of running a private school in a state where the queer community is under attack by our state government, but we still have some freedoms and some flexibility. I know that my experience as a private school educator is going to be very different than, say, my colleagues who are public school teachers in Florida. So I'm leaving room for that in this conversation is important. And I think that we had a discussion with Montessori for Social Justice in the summertime that included a larger perspective of those teachers in public schools in places where they're being attacked and their rights are being attacked, and there are a lot of new laws restricting what they can do, and we can sort of have those conversations throughout the night. So know that I am, where I am, and I'm acknowledging that I would love to have conversation about how you can navigate your specific school situation. So this is sort of an overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. I will run through my talking points, and then I would really like to get us to the point where we are doing questions and answers and having a conversation, because I think that's really valuable. And as much as we can talk about all of our experiences, that's my goal. So here's sort of an overview of trans terms. So tonight we're going to talk largely about transgender community and transgender students. We will also talk about the larger community, but know that the goal of tonight was to talk about being gender inclusive and gender expansive. So LGBTQIA+, stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, and questioning, intersex, and asexual. And then the plus sort of acknowledges that the community is incredibly diverse. And I think that the older that I get, I'm in my late 30s, the more that I recognize that like the teenagers and younger are, creating more terms and more, it's getting narrower and narrower. So there are so many labels as it gets broader and more specific. So the plus sort of encompasses that. Oh, I'm getting a scrolling wheel and I'm hoping that you can still hear me. Okay. Okay, great. So assigned sex at birth, that is the assigned sex that you are given when you are born based on your genitals. Cisgender is when your gender identity matches your assigned sex at birth. So I am cisgender. I was assigned female at birth. I identify as a female. Transgender is when your gender identity does not match what your assigned sex at birth. Non-binary is a term that is different for each person who uses it. So it can mean that you identify as a little bit of all genders or a little bit of no genders or everything in between. So non-binary is a term that sort of incorporates everyone who falls outside the binary. Gender non-conforming sort of in the same, it's sort of an umbrella term for people who are whose gender identity doesn't match their assigned sex at birth. Gender expression is how you express your gender. And that there's a range of gender expression for cisgender and transgender people. How you look on the outside, how your body looks on the outside, how you're dressing, and how your gender is perceived based on that. One of the things that I tell my students and my own children all the time is that you can't tell someone's gender by looking at their body. And that is very important to me as we're talking about perceiving other people, because you can have long hair or short hair and be a girl or a boy. You can wear a dress and be a girl or a boy. You can't know what someone's gender is by looking at their body. And further than just sort of the superficial things, you also can't know someone's gender by their genitals, by the shape of their body, those sorts of things. Your gender identity is the identity in which you're, the gender that feels right to you.
Elena,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
We have a comment in the chat that
Sure.
I wonder, could you try sharing your presentation in present mode? We're seeing, we're not
What do
seeing
you
the
see?
present mode.
You're not seeing the present mode. Woo, what do you see?
We're seeing the title page or the
Oh,
title
no.
slide.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I'm engrossed in the content that you're sharing with us.
All right, hold on. I'm so sorry about that. Let's see.
No,
All right. Okay. Oh, click to exit full screen. Holy moly. Wow.
I think if you do share screen and then go back to your PowerPoint.
Yeah, I think my PowerPoint froze.
Well, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here tonight, because I recognize that there is severe weather gripping the entire country this evening. So kudos to everyone who's here this evening in spite of the wicked weather out there. So I know lots of things are running very slow because of the very cold weather outside.
All right. So I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties. I think my
That's okay.
Safari
You're
froze
doing
up.
great.
All right. Can we see
There we
this?
go.
All right.
Yes.
So I am devastated to hear you missed out on my list of facts. All right. Let's see. Kat, let me know if this works. Can you see this?
We can see your cursor on the slideshow button
But
at the
not the
top.
slideshow.
Well, we can see the slideshow below. It's just not in present mode, but
Okay.
we're seeing the next slide. So don't worry, Elena, why don't you go ahead and stay in that
Okay.
in that mode, and then we'll.
Okay. cool. Sorry, I think I'm stressing it out by putting it in present mode, so I'm just gonna leave it. We're gonna do it
Yeah, it's
slightly more
okay.
analog, and we'll leave it in the in this view. So
We're educators. We're flexible. We go with the flow.
all right, so let's see, can I make this window go away? No, I can't. Okay, cool. So yes, all right, so we were at sexual orientation.
Perfect.
Wonderful. So sexual orientation is, who you are attracted to romantically, emotionally, sort of those things. And it's important to note that your identity, your gender identity, and your sexual orientation are not linked in any way. So you can be cisgender and attracted to the whole spectrum of people, transgender, attracted to the whole spectrum of people. And I think that when the trans community is being attacked, it is often with language about how, we are exposing children to inappropriate subjects. We're exposing children to things that they're too mature for them. And the implication there is that we're exposing kids to sexual things. And your gender identity is not sexual. And that's an important distinction to make. When I'm talking to parents who are feeling uncomfortable, that's an important distinction for them to hear, because I think that separation in their mind often isn't happening. And so sort of really making that clear for them that these are two different things, and the way that we talk to kids about them are different. Gender dysphoria / euphoria. So gender dysphoria is when something about your body, your presentation, your physical corporeal self causes, like, misaligns with your gender identity and causes feelings of discomfort. The inverse of that is gender euphoria, where something about the way that you're dressing, the way that you're presenting, makes you feel euphoric about your gender. So trans individuals will feel both gender dysphoria and gender euphoria. And the last thing on my list is gender affirming care and treatment. So gender affirming care and treatment can look like hormones, it can look like surgery, it can look like therapies, it can look like things that are helping trans individuals feel more safe and comfortable in their body and help them to affirm their gender identity. All right, so the main goal for us as educators is creating a safe and welcoming school environment. And that is done through a series of things that you can do both in your classroom and on an administrative level. So I'll touch a little bit on both, and then we can get into the nitty-gritty about who you're serving and what your individual experiences look like sort of down the road. So a big part of the goal, a big thing that you can do, that every teacher can do, is just relieving the pressure gasket of gender created by society. And what I mean by that is that for so many people, gender identity is just, it's ever present. It's heavy. It's heavy when we address our classroom as boys and girls. It's heavy when we are, playing games where we're dividing kids into boys and girls, when we have bathrooms that are labeled boys and girls. So we can take a lot of that pressure off just by removing some of the things from our language and our environment. For the younger kids that I teach, I know the older middle schoolers don't love this word, but we use friends pretty much as a blanket word for talking about the kids. So instead of saying boys and girls, we will say friends. Sometimes we'll say like students, or like refer to them as children, but usually we say friends. When I'm addressing them as a crowd, I always use gender neutral language. And then also when we're referring to people in books, when we're reading things and we're learning about things, I use as much gender neutral language as possible, just to incorporate and normalize that in the vernacular. We read a lot of books about families, about different kinds of people, about the way different people kinds of look, and just using more gender neutral language in that is a way to just make it more normalized for the kids. Gendered bathrooms are a big one, especially as they get older. And that's a really simple thing to change if you have the power to change it. I recognize that many of you aren't working in schools where you have the power to change it. So I do recognize that. If you do have the power to change that, making the bathrooms in your classroom gender neutral is a way to just take the pressure off of that. Obviously, things like gendered sports, gendered buildings, depending on the size of the school, depending on the age that you're teaching, that carries more weight and more pressure. But as a society, pulling back on so much of the gender pressure ultimately helps. For younger students, there's a lot of, in society, boys do this, girls do that. Boys like this, girls like that. Boys wear this, girls like that. And we do a lot of just quietly and peacefully pushing back on that for kids. Kids will come in and say, only girls can wear pink. And we'll say, actually, anyone can wear pink. Who wants to wear pink? And then we just have 1 million of these little conversations over and over all day, every day. Only girls have long hair. Actually, anyone can have long hair. It's just a constant conversation with the students. And the more that you talk about it, the more it becomes normalized, and that sort of progresses with them. So there are a lot of small things that you can do and shift in your language, in your classroom. And then there are big things. If you're in a position of power, if you're in a position where you have control, there are big things that you can do school-wide that can make big impacts. Filling your classroom with books, arts, and materials that are LGBTQIA plus inclusive and affirming is a big one. If you have control over your school's library, your classroom library, at the end, I will link a book list, a resource book list, but there's so many incredible books that show both that are about queer or trans kids, and that just show so books where they're the fact that they are queer, the fact that they are trans is part of the storyline. And then there are so many books that just show them living normal lives. And you really want to offer both. It's the same thing as when we talk about normalizing people looking different, having different bodies, having different races. We just want different books that show different kinds of people doing normal things, because that is how the kids will feel normalized with that identity. So having books with families that look all sorts of different ways, having books that talk about kids that have, different friend groups, different family makeups, different grandparents. There's so many different things, especially for the youngest kids. That's how they're creating their worldview, is through those books and those materials. Art in your classroom, that again, sort of the same thing, shows different kinds of people. Pride flags are a really easy way to do it if you can hang those in your classroom. Things that signal to kids, especially as they're getting older, especially as they're getting into lower elementary, signaling to kids that this is a place where they are not only safe, because safe is sort of the baseline, every kid should be safe at school, but where they are welcomed and they are celebrated is just really important. And then, for those older kids, creating student organizations based on gender and sexuality. So there are rainbow clubs and things like that that your students can create, where they can connect and talk and be in community with each other, and then also give feedback to the teachers on their experience and what they want and their needs. And so then sort of the next level, the next thing that schools can provide for students are gender support plans. So a gender support plan is a collaborative plan between the student, the teachers, and the school administrators, or if your school has one, the gender support team. With my school, the size that it is, we mostly have had a director and teachers and student, and sometimes parents, if the student wants the parents to be involved. We don't have a designated gender support team because of the size of our school. A much bigger school might have a designated gender support team of teachers and administrators who were competent and capable of handling that, helping students navigate that process. The goal of a gender support plan is to give clear guidelines for teachers and staff in supporting a student through the experience of transitioning and to protect gender nonconforming students. So it's both to help the student think through what they want this to look like at school, what they want, like, what are their pronouns, who's using those pronouns, what's like, how do they want to be referred to, what bathrooms are they going to use, what, you know, what is their experience going to be during PE, what is their experience going to be during clubs, how do they want the teacher to talk to their peers about it, how do they want the teachers to talk to other parents about it, like those sorts of things, like what the student wants in support. And then also to protect the student, you know, in a situation where the teacher might be uncomfortable or averse to supporting a student who's transgender, a gender support plan does give them some protection. It gives clear guidelines, and it gives like a very clear in writing metric. We, again, depending on the student who is transitioning, like they might come to you and want it to just be private between you and them. They might want you to talk to the other teachers, but not tell the students. They might want the whole school to know, but not to have their parents involved. So you're really opening the door for that student and just telling them that you are a safe person for them to talk to you about that, and giving them room for that to evolve. And I think that's a really important part of it too, is that, you know, when people are transitioning, when students are, especially kids, like we're never going to hold someone to the first iteration of their support needs. We're always going to leave room for them to need other things, to vocalize other things, to, you know, to say what they need to be, how they need to be served. You know, it's especially as they're growing, especially as they, you know, go from, say, lower elementary to upper elementary, how they need to be supported is going to evolve. And so just leaving the door open and making sure that they know that nothing, like no gender support plan is written in stone and like sealed forever and done. Like there's always room to revise it. I think that every student we've had that has gone through a transition has taught us something about our process. And I think that as long as you are being a kind person, an empathetic person, a loving person, it is okay for you to grow with the student through the process. You don't know what it's going to be like to support a trans student until you've supported a trans student. And every time it's going to be a little different. You know, I had students who came out who were, the experience with them and their family was incredible. So easy, so smooth. Their peers, so easy, so smooth. The parents of the other kids, terrible. So like and then I've had other experiences where I was just like absolutely fine. It really is going to be different every time with every student, because these are individual humans and you're going to learn something new every time with every student, and that's okay. So making sure that you're giving yourself grace, that you're giving your teachers grace, and that you're giving the student and the student who's transitioning and their peers grace, coming to the whole situation from a place of empathy is just really important. The gender support plan should be there to facilitate a conversation, and that can be, you know, a conversation obviously with the student, and then a conversation with their teachers, with their peers, however that needs to look. And then it's really important that you get consent from the child to involve their families and their parents. I say that recognizing that in some states that's not legal. So in some states now you are mandated to tell the parents, and navigating that is tricky. If you have the option to respect the child's wishes on the subject, please do. You can't know that a parent is going to be safe for a child transitioning just by your interactions on them. That child is the person who knows their parents and their family situation best. So just respecting them and respecting their experience is really important. You know, I I have often had experiences where with parents where like, I thought we had a really congenial relationship and then something happened and all of a sudden I got like a mad parent and I saw a totally different side of the parent that I'd never seen before because we'd only had really like positive door of the school conversations. And so you just never know the other side to a person, and you have to trust the student if they tell you that it's not safe for their parents to know that they are trans. And then again, like they might come to you down the road and be like, hey, I'm ready to tell my parents, will you support me in this? And then that's the next step. So one of the things that we have talked about the most with our teachers and the parents of our upper L and secondary age groups specifically is that there is a fluidity of gender identity that is happening in this generation of kids that wasn't available to previous generations. And I think that's a thing that really panics adults because we are looking at these kids from our perspective and our relationship to the queer community and queer identities. And we want things to be not even same, but like relatable to our experience. So when I was in middle school, high school, and I was like, I knew that I wasn't a straight person, but I didn't know how to tell anybody else about it. And there was only one out guy at our high school, but he was like out. And I didn't know any lesbians in person. I didn't know any bisexual women in person. Like I didn't have any representation of what that looked like. I just kept it deep inside me until eventually I went to art school and then like everyone was gay and it was easier to talk to people about it. But my experience, I didn't know my first out trans person until college. And I went to art school where it was like a safe place to be trans. So my experience, I'm 37, 20 years ago as a high schooler, 25 years ago as a high schooler, and then 20 years as a college student is so different. So much has changed. Society has changed so much. Our relationship with queer identities has changed so much that the kids today have an absolutely different relationship to gender identity, gender expression, sexuality than we did. And it's uncomfortable sometimes for us to watch this process. But I think that the more professionals I talk to about that, the more I see that it's sort of normalized across, at least across like the American educators I know, where like you're seeing students trying on different pronouns, trying on different identities, and switching quite a bit. And I think that in the same way that adolescence, like a tenet of being an adolescent is trying on different personalities, right? Like you are gonna, like maybe you're into this sport for a while, maybe you're into this music for a while, maybe you're into this like clothing style for a while. You're trying on all these different things and you're trying to see what fits and you're trying to see who you are. And I think that what we're seeing with this generation of kids is that for them, it's so normalized, it's so easy and available to try on different gender identities that they are adding that to the list of things that they are learning about themselves and being like, does this fit? Maybe let's see. And then keeping what works for them and letting go of what doesn't. And I think that while 20 years ago, we were forced to do that sort of like trying on in private inside of ourselves, maybe with a few trusted friends, they have the ability to do that trying on outside and in the open. And I think that that's something that should really be celebrated. And I think that like we were talking about with the gender support plan, giving them space to be fluid is really important. So making sure that there's space in your school culture for them to have different pronouns, identify different ways, evolve that for themselves and for their peers so that they don't feel like, oh, well, I came out as, they, them, and now I'm stuck with that forever. Now that's me forever. Let them evolve that. Let them have the space to be like, well, I was really feeling like they, them worked, but now he, they is maybe where I'm more comfortable. And then maybe in 6 months, it's he, him, and just giving them the room to feel it out and try it on, and not to make that feel uncomfortable or punitive or anything. Like, you know, we had a student who had a really long, I would call it a bi-curious period. And everyone in his life was really chill and supportive about it. And then eventually he was like, you know, I think I'm just straight after all. And everyone was like, okay. Like, he just, you know, he spent a few years in middle school, like thinking about it and trying it on and seeing if it fit. And then he decided by high school that like, that didn't work for him. And maybe he'll circle back, but like giving him just the space to like see if that worked for him and then move through it is really important. So we don't want to hold kids to, you know, the first thing that they say to you. I just want to give them that flexibility. I think that's an important part of adolescence, is just shifting through that. You know, one of the things that I think we as adults want to do is assign labels and put labels on things. And one of the things that I'm seeing the younger students not want are those same labels. So I also think that we have to accept that generationally things will shift. And, you know, it's just, I had a friend of mine is a college professor locally, and she said that her college students told her that queer is out and gay is in. We're back to just saying gay. And it's like, okay, so now in my like short life, queer was bad, then queer was what we were saying, and now queer is back out. So I think we just have to be, we all have to be fluid and flexible. So then we'll get to gender versus sexuality and sexual orientation. We talked a little bit, but gender is your innermost concept of your own relationship with gender, either in a binary way, so you are male or female, or a non-binary way, both or neither or blend. So I think for, when I have friends who are trans, who are my same age, and when they came out to their parents, who are in their 60s and 70s, the idea of being non-binary was so confusing to that parent generation, that it was, you were either a man going to a woman or you are a woman going to a man. And the journey, that there might be stops along the journey, that there might be other options, was really challenging for people. So, gender is expansive. Sexual orientation is who a person is attracted to emotionally, romantically, and physically. And obviously, the way that we're going to talk about sexuality is different with the primary students than with the lower elementary, upper elementary, and secondary students. So when we're talking to the primary students, the toddler and primary students, about sexuality, we're talking about families and what families look like. And, we're showing examples of different kinds of families. And that is representative, obviously, of, families, two-parent families of different makeups, but then also single parent families and grandparent families, and like all the different ways that you can have a family. But making sure that you're talking about parents and giving the option, giving examples and representation of, two moms, two dads, two parents whose gender is not a part of the, the conversation of the book, that have like alternative names. Like, making sure that you're offering examples of all those different things is just a way to make the students feel more comfortable. If they have parents that look different than the mom, dad, two kids, if they have a family that looks different than that model, that, sort of traditional model, making sure that they are being shown other types of families. I have friends who are two women, and one of them is a little bit more mask, and one of them looks like, I think I could only describe her as, a traditional an art teacher, right? She wears like a lot of flowing clothes. And another 5-year-old who also has two moms was describing this couple to his friend. And he's like, well, my friend's parents, one of them looks like a boy and one of them looks like a grandma. And I just really loved that. So like the way that these kids are shown, you know, different types of people, different types of families is really important. And it impacts how they create their worldview. As your students get to be older and to the age where they are having romantic feelings for other people, they are eventually having sexual feelings for other people, you're normalizing those sorts of relationships in different ways. They have a broader understanding of the world. And, you know, you're just working on not creating shame around those things. There are, and again, they'll be in the book list at the end, but there's some really great books about puberty and that are like not super gendered and that are really positive, LGBT positive. My favorite one is, I think, called the Everybody book. It's just a really, really good one where it talks about like some people have uteruses, some people have penises, like just like really leaving it super open-ended. And taking, because again, that's another way that we're like really putting kids in tiny boxes, right? Is that like boys have penises, girls have vaginas, like and so books that give them more gender neutral language are really helpful. And then just giving them examples of fiction and nonfiction books that normalize all sorts of different kinds of relationships. And again, just being a safe place for them to be themselves and to have their own feelings. All right. So that was sort of the end of my spiel. And now we can get to the chatting part. If you would like to reach me via email for follow-up questions after, this is my email address. And I will put these resources in the chat box. I have some links. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then I'm going to open it up for any questions. You maybe use the like little hand raise.
Elena, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes. And I encourage folks, if you have a question, please feel free to take yourself off mute and raise your hand. We're watching. Does anyone have questions for Elena this evening? Or if you're in a place where you can't talk, but you'd like to put something in the chat, I'm monitoring that as well. Elena, thank you so much for sharing with us this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. And yeah, so I shared in the chat the LGBT reading list. And then I'm going to send there is a resource that is it's like a form for creating a gender support plan. And it's from what the organization is, the Gender Spectrum. So the Gender Spectrum put together this gender support plan form so that you can use that as a guide. We created, based on that resource, our own for our school, so you could sort of pull from that, but that's a really great resource. So Jennifer says, any advice for how to get parents on board? So I have had some really intense conversations with parents over the years about students and staff. And what I will tell you is that some people are open and can come to the conversation from a place of empathy and can come to the conversation from a place where they're willing to have a conversation, and some people just aren't. And you do sort of have to accept that you won't win every conversation. You won't convince everyone, and that's okay. Your job primarily, first and foremost, is to create a safe environment for that student and to protect that student at school. It is, I think, and this is hard for me sometimes, my primary goal when I'm going into these like hard conversations that I know are going to be hard, is to assume positive intent. So I'm assuming that the parent I'm talking to loves their kid. I'm assuming that the parent I'm talking to wants all of these children to be safe and loved in an environment where they are safe and loved. So when I can go into the conversation with that baseline, that helps me to present things in a way that is more empathy forward and not defensive. Because I think that one of the things I really struggle with is like, I'll get my hackles up and then there's no recovering. So I really try and go in from an empathy forward place. I think that talking about things at an age appropriate level is really important. And I think that sometimes, I just went through this today because we were talking about, with my preschool class, like primary class, we were talking about like the transatlantic slave trade. And I was, just like letting parents know that that's what we were talking about today. And some like parents always like, they see that word and they just like get like so anxious that we're going to, be talking to their kid about something that's too mature. It's always that they're worried that it's too mature. And then with all of these big hard conversations, we're just reminding them what that looks like in our class. We're showing them the books that we're reading. We're telling them the language that we're using. We're telling them how we are making this developmentally and age appropriate for their student. So I have started, at open houses, I'll put out a spread of books that we use to talk about lots of different subjects. So parents can see those and get a feel for that. Because what you're trying to do for the youngest children, and we can talk about the older children too, but for the youngest children, what you're trying to do is just plant some seeds, create a safe environment, create a celebratory environment, and create a foundation for them to grow from. So like, they will get deeper and deeper into all these subjects as they get older, and reminding parents that like, there's nothing sexual about a transgender kindergartner is really important. The way we're talking, like this kindergartner who's shifting pronouns isn't in any way exposing your child to more mature subjects like that. Those sorts of reminders to help them create those delineations are important. When religious beliefs are at play, that can be complicated and that can be hard. And I think that there are some great resources online for statements from pastors and from rabbis and from, cultural leaders about the LGBTQ community. And so sort of pulling some of those resources to give it to them in a language and from a person of authority in, sort of the culture that they're coming from can help. But it's also not, you didn't do anything wrong or you didn't do anything bad if you have this conversation with a parent and it goes south and they don't, come out of it feeling like agreeing with you. It is like sometimes you're going to go into these hard conversations and you're just not going to convince somebody. And also sometimes you're going to have these hard conversations and it's going to feel super intense while it's happening. And then 48 hours later, they're going to email you and be like, actually, I thought about this and like, thank you so much. And you've, made me think more about that. So know that human belief is a process. I've been arguing with my stepmom about the same 5 moral subjects since I was a teenager. And I like to believe that I'm slowly inching her my way, but like, maybe I never will. Maybe I'll spend every Thanksgiving yelling for no reason. We'll see. So Norman, you have your hand raised.
I see, Doc, yes.
Well, first of all, Elena, thank you for your kind and generous words about a population that is oftentimes impacted, disproportionately discriminated against. And what I think we certainly know as we look at the swaying of extreme across this country, and I'm not talking about the blizzard weather, I'm talking about the fact that what you talk about, if we think about it from a Montessori perspective, it is scientific, right? That I put it in the chat window. I'm also, I identify as gay, he, him. I have a husband. I have adopted children. I've lived years with this perspective that when I first came out, it was gay and queer was political. And then it was, then we put gay second and identified L as lesbian, LGBT and then it was LGBT, and now it's LGBTQIA plus. And what I identified at one point in time was, how about if we just call ourselves X plus? And what that really means is every single one of us shares an X chromosome. We get that from, let's see, our maternal side, right? And she, if she is a she may identify as a she, but those are all constructs of our human condition as one race of human beings, right? Our gender fluidity is just as you said. And so perhaps we could somehow create a political uprising in Montessori education that we want to get rid of all of those acronyms and just identify as X plus, because after all, we only become male or partly male when we get that Y chromosome from the paternal side of the person who contributes themselves to conceiving us. And that doesn't necessarily become rigid across each of the religions, right? Because Native Indigenous people are identified with two spirits or multiple spirits, and the Thai population, the culture of those who they call it an extra star, or they have multiple stars. We had an exchange student once upon a time from Thailand who identified as a lady boy, which is the I call it a slang term in Thailand, but it's essentially a trans individual. And he came as a boy and left questioning and knowing more than likely he was going to grow up like Celine Dion. And today she is now Jocelyn and living in Indonesia, of all places, where homosexuality is seen, as illegal. So you're right. I think what conversation comes about is about the maturational levels of disaggregating the definitions of words that we put to people that don't necessarily mean what they mean. So X plus,
Absolutely.
that's how I take it.
I think that's so true. And I think that it's ultimately prioritizing listening to how people talk about themselves is the most important thing, and allowing them to change and allowing them to shift, but just letting them tell you how they want, what pronouns they want, how they want to be perceived, how they want to be referred to, is really just a human kindness that we can all offer each other. Cheryl, I see that your hand is raised.
Thank you. I'll preface this by saying I'm at a public school in North Carolina. So we literally, I take this really literally, that like we're not supposed to call anybody anything that that they didn't come into our school with those pronouns. I'm like, maybe that means nicknames too. I don't know. I'm in Asheville also, so we're very lucky that most of the parents are right on track. Where I feel like we're questioning is with our students who have parents who are transitioning or have transitioned. And what we see a lot is that one parent is not happy that transition has happened. And so there are so many feelings around it that I obviously haven't looked at your book list, but we're always like, how do we help them accept, I mean, just listening to them and supporting them. Today an upper elementary child told me, it's like, as he was telling a story, he said, my dad, and afterwards he pulled me aside and said, don't call him K in front of my friends. And I was like I will call K when I see K, and I just won't use pronouns or names or anything, like I just say your parents. So I don't know how else to help them. Do you have you have anything that you guys do? Any?
Yeah. So this is a subject that I'm so intimately familiar with because my partner is trans. So I've walked this experience with my kids, and it is really hard. It's really hard for everyone in a family, regardless of like how you feel about trans identities or trans communities. Like it is hard when it is your family that is going through upheaval. And I think that it's hard for both adults involved. I imagine it's quite a bit harder when one of the adults is upset about the other's transition. Like that's incredibly difficult. And I think that just being as empathetic as you can be and focusing what you can do on supporting that student. So, I was fortunate that my 7-year-old, it was like, when my partner transitioned a few years ago, it's like the more aware of what was happening. So like he, for a while, like he's always been so amazing at home. For a while though, at school, he got weird about the adults knowing and like saying things in front of his friends. And I finally asked him, after like a year or so of like getting that sort of message from the teachers that like he was very uncomfortable, they weren't sure how to support him. I finally asked him, I was like, buddy, talk to me about this. Tell me, like, is it that you don't like telling people, that the process of telling people is difficult? And for my son, for Everett, that was what it was for him. And I can empathize because like telling my own business to people is really difficult and I don't enjoy it. And that was like coming out for someone else was a really tricky part of this process for me as a partner. But I'm also like the partner who's an extrovert. It's like I'm the one who had to do it a fair amount for society. So for my 7-year-old, having to tell people was such a big emotional hurdle where he didn't know what the words to use. He didn't know the language to use. He just felt really overwhelmed. So it was easier if his friends just didn't know and used, the old name, the old pronoun. And so I asked him, I was like, how would you feel if your friends already knew? If the teacher told them, if I told them, like, how would it be for you if you didn't have to tell them, if they just already knew? And for him, that was the key, that he felt great about that. He was like, oh, that would be awesome. So then I just made a point. I told his teachers and had them sort of like in those conversations, like support him in this way. And then I just started being like really like anytime we had a play date, anytime we had a friend over, I was just like laying it all out there for him right out of the gate. And the more that I did that, the more that I normalized that for Everett, the easier it came for him to sort of have those interactions. So I think that I would talk to your student and find out like what the discomfort is. And if the discomfort is, I'm not cool with this, I'm not cool that my parent isn't doing this, that's okay. And they get to be mad, they get to be frustrated, they get to be embarrassed, they get to be hurt. Like that is also their experience in their family. And I think just creating a place of empathy is the most that you can do. And knowing that they'll walk through this process, they'll move through this process. And that if you can show them that you're a safe person to talk to, and I think that, as a fellow North Carolinian, I'm feeling very stressed by the way that things are going in our state. Asheville is thankfully a great community to be a kid with a trans parent in. So hopefully that like your student is in a community where they'll have a journey where as they accept it, they'll feel more supported. So I think just connecting with students and letting them know that like whatever feeling they're having is valid. Like it's all okay. Like when we're having these experiences in our own families, it is more emotionally charged and it is heavier and it is more complicated. And that's not a bad thing. And it doesn't make it like, there's no moral judgment in having difficulty with someone in your immediate family, you know, your parent especially transitioning. So
That's helpful. Thank you.
absolutely.
Ms. Redmond, can I make a comment to reference to what you were saying?
Absolutely.
Because I know Ms. Shirley just spoke too. I mean, Ms. Shirley and Ms. Elaine just spoke. Because I actually had a friend, well, my best friend's daughter that went through this because for a while that she was bullied because she was kind of like a tomboy. She didn't really wear the dresses and everything like this. And her mom was a little bit more understanding. Dad, that was his first baby girl. He was like, you're not turning into a guy. You know, this is not normal. So it did cause a lot of tension with the family and everything like this. But eventually, Dad did come around to where now he's supportive of her. I mean, supportive of him. I'm trying to work on the pronoun because it's so many different names now than when I was growing up.
Yeah.
So I still want to be like empathetic and understanding. But sometimes I just don't know how to approach the, you know, the issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's giving yourself grace is important because, you know, when you misgender someone and you don't know their pronouns, like that's, if they correct you, you say, oh, thank you for telling me, and then use the
Okay.
correct pronouns. If you misgender someone and you do know their pronouns, but you forgot, that's also okay. You say, oh, I'm so sorry, and then use the correct pronouns.
Okay.
It is like we're humans, and it's a lot to keep up with all the
But
information.
now it's so many more names than
Yeah,
before.
absolutely. Yeah, I had a college student who was like telling me that they were like demi-romantic and then something else and then something else. And I was like, that is awesome. And also so many words. And I clearly don't remember any of them. And I think it's cool. And
Mhm.
also it's a lot. So
Okay.
I think it's okay to give yourself grace to not remember everything about everyone all the time. And then if you slip up when you're talking to somebody, just apologize and correct yourself. And that's, you know, showing that you're like, if you are purposely misgendering someone from a place of hatred, that's obviously a bad thing. If you're accidentally misgendering someone because
Okay.
you forgot, like that's cool. And that I think everyone appreciates that moment of humility and being like, oh, I'm so
Okay.
sorry. I didn't mean to say that, or I said that on accident. I meant, you know, whatever.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want it coming from like a place of hating. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the right, you know, pronunciation of the names,
Yeah.
and just being open-minded, you know, and being respectful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all you can do.
Okay.
I think coming at it from that place is a really wonderful thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Well,
Absolutely.
thank you, everyone. This has been a great topic. Thank you, Elena, so much. I would like to remind everyone that we at Sarasota have launched our bachelor's completion program this month. And I've dropped in the chat information about our information sessions this Friday. If you or someone you know is interested in enrolling in our bachelor's completion program that leads to a bachelor's of science in Montessori education or programs, please register and join me this Friday. We have a morning and an evening session. And also I've dropped Elena's email in the chat. So if you'd like to connect with her and follow up, if you have further questions, I know she would be more than happy to talk to you. But again, thank you everyone for being here this evening. Thank you again, Elena. And see you next month, February 20th. Is next quiz speaking on the power of love. She's the founder of Lovescaping. And February, I hope you all have a very happy Valentine's Day and hope to see you on the 20th, where we'll be talking about the power of love. So you all stay warm and we'll see you next month.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.